Last week, I spoke with Barbara Boxer about jobs and the recession. This week's conversation centers on immigration and the battle over partisan power in the upcoming election. The three-term U.S. Senator is facing the most challenging race of her career against former HP CEO Carly Fiorina. Here's the second part of our conversation. As much as the president talked about immigration being an issue, something to be solved, nothing has come from the Congress, nothing has passed his desk, nothing has even come out that anybody said had a chance of passing. Do you think there's a chance that there could be immigration reform legislation this year before the midterm elections?
I would like to see us finish immigration reform once and for all by the end of the year. Belva, I had the opportunity to vote for two bills that were comprehensive immigration reform, and they were bipartisan. They were Kennedy-McCain, they were Kennedy-Specter. This was back in '06 and '07. And unfortunately, there were filibusters. And so we weren't able to get the 60 votes. And as a result, the issue festers. Now, to me, I see it very clearly, a path forward. You got the people who say, border enforcement only. Now, we absolutely have to enforce our borders like every other country. You have to do it right. And we have increased Border Patrol agents by about 5 times. We've gone up to about 20,000 agents on the border, and we just did another increase. And we have controlled more of the border, but still in all, it's still too porous. Then you have those who say, look, we've got 11 million people here who are hiding in the shadows. It's wrong. We have to figure out a pathway for the good people who are here. If they commit crimes, they should be deported. If they're good people, let's figure out a pathway forward. We got to meet in the middle, the two sides. And we can do this. I know we can, because actually Chuck Schumer and Lindsey Graham met in the middle and have a bill. So I have written to the president, and I've spoken to my colleagues. I would like to move forward with this, because it's an economic issue when people are living in the shadows. It's just not healthy. It's wrong, and we have to figure it out, and we can figure it out.
Because of the increase in raids and other negative impacts on the Hispanic community, can Democrats, do you think, count on Latinos coming to the polls to continue their loyalty to the Democratic Party?
Well, I just have to say this. I think it's very clear between the two parties who's trying to resolve this and who's not. I mean, you have people who are saying, let's repeal the 14th Amendment, for God's sakes. You know, as somebody wrote, that's taking leave of our senses. If you're born in America, you're an American citizen. That's a basic premise. So you have people doing that. Those are the Republicans. And so I think it's our job as Republicans and Democrats, again, to come forward and take care of this. You have a lot of people who have backed the Arizona law. Well, the Arizona law, like my opponent did, it's very divisive. It targets, you know, Latinos, no question about it. So I think Latinos know where our hearts are. But to get to your point, I take nothing for granted. We need to show that we can legislate. That's why I've been pushing the DREAM Act, which would help with our young people and get them a path to legality and give them an education. And also, I've been pushing Ag Jobs, which is a very good bill that Senator Feinstein and I wrote, which would legalize the agricultural workers, but not set up a guest worker system that's exploitive. So we have all this to do, and we need a path to legality. And I think that the Hispanic community knows who's on their side. I really do.
We want to get to the environment, but before that, on this topic, Hispanics were hit hard by the housing meltdown, especially out in the Central Valley. The home foreclosures was high. What is or can Congress do at this point to protect people who continue every day to lose their homes in this economy?
Well, I would say that many people lost their homes across ethnic lines, really across many lines. And I think clearly what we have to do is give people a chance to refinance, because interest rates are so low right now. If people are stuck with an interest rate of 6% or 7% and they can go down to 4%, could make all the difference in the world. So we have a program that President Obama is pushing. It needs to do better. In addition, I don't know if you're aware of this, many of our families, if they could go to bankruptcy court, could get the judge to order lower payments, and everybody would come together and do that, the banks and the consumer. there's an anomaly in our bankruptcy law. You're allowed to, if you go bankrupt, everything but your main house gets to be part of the settlement. And we need to change that law, but the banks don't like it. But it would be very important to keep people in their homes, to give them a chance to have a bankruptcy judge figure out a way that the bank gets their money a little slower than they'd want, but people get to stay in their homes. By the way, we've had several votes on it, and we've lost those votes by a hair. It's very frustrating.
On the environment, California is faced with the Proposition 23, that could weaken the environmental laws passed here. You chair the most powerful environmental committee in the Senate.
Yeah.
Where are we in terms of people's belief in global warming and believing this is the answer? And are the jobs there even if we accept it as true?
Well, the first thing I want to say is if we pass clean energy legislation, we create millions of jobs, even in this deep, dark recession. Because of our laws in California that are cutting edge on the environment, we have seen 10,000 new businesses take hold and 125,000 new jobs. This disastrous proposition to roll back, or actually delay it many years, our global warming legislation would be terrible. And guess who's paying for it, Belva? The big oil companies from Texas. My opponent supports that. She's getting money from King Coal, the coal community. This is the future versus the past. We've got to move to clean energy. The country that does it and the state that does it is going to be the leader in this century. So we need to do it.
Finally, do you fear, as some pundits are saying, that Democrats could lose both the House and the Senate, that we could have a turnover in the Congress this year?
You know, you never know what happens until it happens, but in my gut, I believe people are smart enough to know we don't want to go back to the days of George Bush. And that's what my opponent's espousing, you know, tax cuts to the wealthy few, deregulation, that's their plan. Well, we saw what happened with their plan. The deepest, darkest recession since the Great Depression. I think at the end of the day, look, people aren't happy. They want change to come quicker. They have to remember we were losing 700,000 jobs a month when the president took over, this president. And he was handed a huge deficit of $1 trillion. And yes, we've turned it around too slowly, but we're moving forward, and we have to keep our courage. We don't want to go backwards, because I think that would be a disaster. And I think that's what my election is about to a great degree, and elections all across the country.
Well, we've invited Carly Fiorina, Senator Boxer's opponent, to be a guest on this program.